Today we are concluding a three-part sermon series on covenantal faith. The first sermon defined the difference between covenantal and creedal faiths. Creedal faiths have a set of doctrines that must confess as believing. While there may be a relational component to a creedal faith, ultimately it comes down to what one believes, not what one does. Covenantal faiths are relational in nature. They focus on how we live in relationship with one another. Our deeds are more important than our creeds. The second sermon focused on membership in a covenantal faith, specifically membership as a congregation in our denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and membership in a congregation. The expectations for the macro and micro membership are similar. Attendance and participation at the main gathering events. For the congregation, send delegates to regional and national assemblies. Be in relationship as a congregation with other nearby Unitarian Universalist congregations, and support its work with a fair share financial contribution. The individual members' covenant is similar. Attend Sunday services and or other gatherings. Be in relationship with one another to get to know and support one another, and support the local congregation with a fair share financial contribution to enable the congregation to support its spiritual and pastoral, emotional, and intellectual needs of the congregation. Today, we focus on the third aspect of a covenantal faith, worshiping together. A question that I hear quite frequently is, why do Unitarian Universalists use the word worship? Aren't Unitarian Universalists secularists? And therefore, why not use the word program or presentation or simply meeting? The word worship in its earliest form comes from the Old English word werthsipi, meaning to give someone or something their worth. It is two words combined, werth meaning worthy, sipi, which derives from the Old High German word skeppen, meaning to shape. So to worship also means to shape or hold something of worth. Reverends Wayne Arneson and Kathleen Rowlands, in their book Worship That Works, states werthsipi can be translated into considering things of worth. It is this definition of worship that we claim as Unitarian Universalists. We come together to consider the values that we have found worthy in the living of this life, and in the hopes that by doing so we may shape our lives, our relationships with each other and our neighbors towards the good. Worship for Unitarian Universalists is not adoration for a deity, but a weekly consensual act of affirming our covenant and our relationships with one another. We look toward a future where our principles are embodied reality of how we live our lives, all the while recognizing that the embodying of our principles does not come in a perfect package. It comes in this one, and in this one, and in this one over here. All of our experiences, the wonderful moments and the traumatic episodes in our life, have brought us to this point where we are together today in this room. We each have also had experiences that brought us comfort and aided us in our journey. So as a faith, we worship together to offer some of our experiences, some words of wisdom, some words of comfort, maybe some methods of healing, so we may continue in our journey, not alone, but with each other. And as a faith, we affirm and bring into the worship service 6 sources of our living tradition. For some of us, the wisdom of the humanists may be of import in our lives. And so we long for a worship service that recognizes these wise words of sage advice. For another, it is the words and deeds of prophetic people, that cloud of witnesses of those who have gone before us that encourage us to work towards a world of justice, compassion, with the transforming power of love. For still another, it is the Abrahamic faith traditions of our Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Baha'i siblings that call us to love our neighbor as ourselves. For someone else, It is the opportunity for a direct experience of the transcending mystery and wonder. Or perhaps it is the earth-centered traditions of various indigenous faiths that beat in our hearts a connection with the circle of life of all creation. Because of these theological differences, not every service in a Unitarian Universalist congregation is the same. There are congregations that lean more towards one source more than another, but the hope is that each congregation will honor the spiritual path that individuals have found most beneficial to them and be willing to affirm the best of those paths so that we may all glean from its wisdom. The potential is that worship will, over the course of time, be able to share from each source and name that which is helpful to their members, so each member will be seen and embraced in our covenant. This means that we might need to be flexible in our worship experience to honor our siblings' experiences. It may mean that we might challenge our own beliefs and creeds because words or music is shared that offer a different perspective. It may mean that in welcoming people who are culturally different than us, we shift our style of worship to widen the circle. It may mean that a specific service might not speak to your heart, but know that it may be just the right words for the person sitting next to you, or a few seats behind or across from you. Or perhaps it was the choir's singing or our accompanist instrumental pieces that lifted your heart this Sunday, and the rest of the service, just so much blah, blah, blah. But for another, in that same service, it might have been that specific reading or a turn of phrase that the minister or speaker said that made all the difference. I have spoken before about the need to be here for others because you may have the right words to share in that moment that only you can deliver, and they could only receive it from you. Worship as a covenantal community is like that as well. The hymns we sing may not use the language that you are most comfortable with, but it may be just the right hymn sung for another. And your singing it with your heart help them to receive its mysterious grace. And perhaps next Sunday will be just perfect for you and your current journey. I want to give you an illustration of what covenantal worship might mean for us. This is a story that I first heard from Connie Goodbread called The Rabbi's Gift. I have adapted it for us today. Many years ago, there was an old, decaying monastery up on a hill overlooking a village. Once the monastery was bustling with activity, but now they only had 5 monks left. An occasional visitor would come by, but never stayed very long. The abbot agonized over the future of the monastery. Now, in the forest just beyond the brook, there was a small cabin that the rabbi from a nearby town would often use for his studies. The monks always knew he was there when they saw smoke from the cabin's chimney rise above the trees. And as the abbot pondered the death of his order, he looked up and saw the familiar wisps of smoke above the trees of the forest. He thought he would visit the rabbi and see if the rabbi might have any advice for him to save his monastery. The rabbi welcomed the abbot with open arms. As the abbot told the reason for his visit, the rabbi nodded his head. "I know how it is," he exclaimed. "The spirit has gone out of the people. It is the same in my town. Almost no one comes to the synagogue anymore." So the rabbi and the abbot shared a meal together and discussed their faiths and commiserated on the plights of their faith. The time came for the abbot to leave. "It has been a wonderful visit," said the abbot, "but I still do not know how I can help save my dying order." The rabbi looked at him and said, "The only thing I can tell you," said the rabbi, "is that the Messiah is among you." The abbot thanked him for his hospitality and left confused by these parting words. When the abbot returned to the monastery, the monks all gathered around. "Did the rabbi give you any advice?" No, he had no advice. He could only sympathize because he is experiencing the same things in his synagogue. But he did say one thing that was a bit odd. "What? What?" shouted the monks. "The rabbi said the Messiah is among us, but I don't know what these words mean." In the months that follow, the monks pondered this and wondered whether there was any possible significance to the rabbi's words. The Messiah is among us? Could he possibly mean one of us here is the Messiah? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? If anyone here is the Messiah, it must be the abbot. Certainly he didn't mean Brother Gregory. Gregory is always complaining about this thing and the other. Still, come to think about it, Brother Gregory's complaints do have merit. Maybe the rabbi meant Brother Gregory. He certainly did not mean me. I'm just an ordinary person, nothing special. Yet what if he did? Suppose I am the Messiah. As they wondered about who among them was the Messiah, the monks began to treat each other with the extraordinary respect on the possibility that one of them might be the Messiah. And in turn, each monk began to treat himself also with extraordinary respect. When they gathered for their daily prayers and meditations, they prayed as if the Messiah was there to hear them. When they chanted and sang their songs, they sang as if they were singing to this wonderful guest among them. When visitors came, they were greeted as if they were the Messiah, with utmost kindness and welcome. And though the monks never spoke about it aloud, about this Messiah being among them, the visitors began to sense that there was something different about this monastery. They were feeling the great love that the monks had for each other and for everyone that visited. The monastery began to look cared for. The gardens were spruced up, the grounds were cleaned up and hedges trimmed, the leaky roof was fixed, the walls were painted. And without knowing why, people began to come to the monastery to picnic and play on their grounds. They came to join the monks in vespers and worship, where the monks would sing as if a very important person was in their midst and wanted to show their utmost respect and honor. The monks no longer just ho-hummed through the worship like it was an obligation, but participated in the readings, the prayers, the chanting, the sharing of gifts, as if they were throwing a wonderful celebration to honor their dearest of dearest friends. Then it happened that some of the people who visited the monastery began to talk more and more with the monks. And in time, one asked if they could join them. And then another, and another. And when they participated in worship, they too sang as if they were singing to some great dignitary who was seated among them. Their reading the text of the day were read with a devotion of love, for they chose them to minister to those in attendance that day. Within a few years, the monastery was once again a thriving order. Our worshiping together as a covenantal faith is meant to honor the best of who we are in relationship with one another. We seek to walk in the ways of love as best as we can see and do, and in the ways yet to be discovered. May our worshiping together nourish us in our journeying this life together. Blessed be.